So this will just be, I'm going to take the assumption that you're already reasonably familiar with data management plans within your own organizations. So as part of the QMF, part of the pack that we developed includes a data management plan. This describes what which data or what data will be created during a project or ongoing monitoring, how those data will then be stored, how they'll be archived at the end of the project, and also how access will be granted where appropriate. And ultimately, its purpose is to help ensure that the data are accurate, complete, reliable, and secure, both during, and that's the important bit as well, is the during and after the completion of the project. Quite often what you see, particularly with research projects, is the data management plan becomes an afterthought, becomes the sort of thing that's done right at the end before the data files are sent across. So let's see. So within our data management plan, what we've set up is a template which covers and structures effectively a series of questions which you're asking to the data owner. So you're asking them for an overview of the data set. How is the data collected? What are the appropriate documentation and metadata that go along with explaining or putting the data in context? Are there any ethics or legal compliance issues that need to be addressed? What's the storage and backup protocol? And how should the data set then be treated in future with regards to preservation and selection for preservation? Also, what's going to take place around data sharing? What licenses should it be under? Is the data embargoed? And particularly during the project, what are the responsibilities and the resources that are available to the data owner or the data users, the data stewards, however you phrase your data staff within your organization. And of course, here's the obligatory Dilbert cartoon, just to emphasize that the data management plan should be a living document, should be something that's looked at every 12 months with regards to ongoing projects, rather than just something that's created once and then refreshed at the end. So what I will do is switch from this now to an actual example of one that we have created. And what we've done is on our SharePoint, we provide a kind of template which outlines the questions to ask, but then over the evolution of having people fill this in, it actually evolved into kind of like a checklist with boxes holding those questions. And so there's just an example here from our regional oceanographic model, the data management plan for that. So what you can see is structured around the data set overview. What is the process flow that that's associated with the data set? A brief data set description, linking back to the data catalog entry. So I think Andrew's going to take us through some process flows, and then Will's going to talk about the data catalog. But you can see that all three are integrated or linked. There's a date. Now, this is just an example one, hence the date, so about a year ago. So this is just the first version, dated, when was it created. Then it details what data are you going to collect or create, and then how will that data be collected or created. Now, in this case, it's a model rather than actual physical samples that have been analysed in a lab. And so you might link out to other documents around the protocols for sample collection. Then what documentation and metadata need to go with the data. Now these are created as climate and forecast .NET-CDF files, which are pretty much mostly self-describing. Ethics and legal compliance. Are there any ethical issues around the data? So for example, in this one, what we're acknowledging is that the data are produced on a best endeavors business days support, i.e. there isn't 24/7 support around if something falls over. And therefore the data shouldn't be used for safety critical applications. And that's therefore acknowledged on the MI website. Also, there's no copyright or IPR on these data. They're environmental data with an open classification. Running through how the data would be stored and backed up, during the research, and then how will access and security be managed. Selection and preservation. So which of the data are of long-term value, which should then be retained and preserved, and what's the long-term preservation plan for the data set? And then data sharing, how will that take place? Are there any restrictions on that? And finally, into the roles and responsibilities. This is getting down to who in the team is actually taking on the responsibilities of looking after the data, and then what resources will be required. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour through the through what we do there and the examples which we can provide afterwards.